Good morning. Rich Nass with Open Systems Media, here for this week's Fireside Chat with Ray Zinn. As you know, Ray joins us every week, and we talk about whatever we feel like talking about, whatever happens to be timely, and usually it's an interesting conversation. Good morning, Ray. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking.
My pleasure. Okay, so we're hearing a lot about defense spending. Actually, there was an article in my newspaper this morning, yes, I still read newspapers, about what Trump has in mind for defense spending. Most people think, and in my opinion, it's a fair argument, that we spend too much. Or better said, we don't get what we should get for what we spend. There's been a lot of that talk. You know, there was that tweet from Trump about $4 billion Air Force One planes. We need to cancel that order. And I certainly agree. I don't think we need to be spending what we're spending on these things, and we can get a lot more for our money. So where do you sit on that discussion? You probably have an interesting take there.
Well, it's kind of like this issue regarding infrastructure spending. When he was running for president, he talked a lot about putting in new bridges and upgrading the airports and highways and so forth. And so we certainly need that too, and maybe a little more so than we do in defense. But the money we do spend in defense, as we know from the past, is somewhat spendful. In other words, we're not being real cautious in the way we spend the money. A lot of politics going on there, lobbying and so forth. Of course, Washington State has a big interest in because of Boeing, and California because of its aircraft industry. So certainly there is going to be some pretty heavy lobbying for weapons type defense, and whether or not they're going to increase the size of the military is somewhat open for question. I don't think Trump's going to reduce it to the extent that Obama did, but certainly he is going to try to cut costs. And I didn't read your article that you said you read in your newspaper today, so maybe you could summarize what did it say, Rich?
Pretty much about that, about how we don't need to stop spending what we spend. We shouldn't cut the budget, but we just need to make sure that we're getting the proper value for what we are spending. You raised an interesting point. I don't even know if you realize you're raising it, though, about the politicians lobbying. And I find that in a lot of these cases, they're throwing these contracts out there just so XYZ state can save jobs in a factory, and everybody goes for it. It isn't really the right way to spend the money. Do you see that as well?
Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. That's what they're paid to do, is try to get jobs for their particular state. And, where California is not particularly high on Trump's list, that may affect some of the defense spending in California, maybe even in Washington now, especially given the lower court ruling against Trump's immigration stay that he did. So those type of things are not going to help in the lobbying process for those states.
Yeah, the other point you raised that I'm all for is this infrastructure. You didn't mention the airports, but I know where I live. If you go to LaGuardia Airport, boy, it's not a pretty place, and it looks like they haven't done an upgrade there like in 50 years. It's a scary looking place. There's things hanging from the ceiling, and it looks like they haven't washed the windows in 15 years. But I'd love to see them spend there.
Well, I mentioned the airports. I did mention that. We need to upgrade the airports. So I do believe he did make a campaign promise with regard to infrastructure spending. So I think he's going to go through with that because he tends to focus on the things he said during the campaign. So he didn't mention a lot about defense spending, only that we have the greatest military, and he's very proud of our military, more so the troops than the weapons themselves. So with the apparent view of detente with Russia, that may slow down some of the weapons spending, and especially with regard to nuclear-type weapons, because I do think if he follows through with this detente with Russia, that will slow down some of that weapons spending. Of course, you got Iran, which is raising its ugly head, as they say, but I'm not sure he has to do a lot to combat or to thwart that country.
Well, as you said, I'm very much in support of the men and the women, the troops themselves. You could certainly not spend enough on that. Okay. I think that'll wrap up today. Anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we covered it. Again, the spending is going to be highly dependent upon the lobbying part and kind of where he views he'd like to spend the money. And he is very much against the West Coast, as they say. I'm from the West Coast, but certainly he's going to take a hard look at what money he spends here.
Very good. Okay, Ray, I will chat with you next week. Have a wonderful week.
Well, you too, Rich. Thanks for calling.
My pleasure.